I apologize for my unattractive daughter-in-law, my mother-in-law suddenly said, grabbing the microphone from my father-in-law during his speech at our wedding. I'll teach her to be better on the inside at least, she added, clearly pleased with herself as silence filled the room. Shocked, I looked at my husband, but he only smirked. As I stood frozen, unable to process what just happened, an older man rose from his seat, making a loud noise to get everyone's attention. Is that all you wanted to say? He asked, walking confidently toward me. When my husband saw him, his face showed complete surprise. The man ignored him, took my arm, and said, "Let's go." Before I could say anything, he led me out of the hall, my dress dragging behind me. My mind raced with thoughts. My name is Pearl. I'm 35 years old and grew up with my mom after my parents divorced. In my 20s, I worked hard to support her when she became ill. In my 30s, I met Anthony, who proposed to me even though he knew I was caring for my mom. I thought I might never have another chance to marry, so I said yes. Anthony promised we could become a family of 3, which touched me deeply. But when we told his family about the marriage, his mom, Sally, was furious. "I don't accept a woman from a broken family," she said coldly. She criticized me constantly while we planned the wedding. She even insulted my mom, which hurt deeply. When we argued, Sally always had harsher words, accusing me of tricking her son into marrying me. Anthony, unfortunately, often stayed silent or took her side. For example, when Sally insisted on choosing my wedding dress, I refused. "I want to pick a dress that makes me happy," I said, standing firm. Sally pretended to be hurt, and Anthony told me, "Don't make her upset." On the wedding day, Sally insulted my dress and veil, which my mom and I had picked out together. Then, to my horror, she splashed coffee all over it, ruining it completely. "This is why you should have listened to me," she said smugly. She had even brought a dress of her choice for me to wear, clearly planning this all along. Devastated, I ran to Anthony, hoping he'd support me. Instead, he snapped, "What do you want me to do about it?" When I tried to explain how hurt I felt, he yelled, "Enough, stop being annoying." It was in that moment I realized he was more like his mother than I wanted to admit. "I can't handle this right now," my husband said, sweating and visibly tense. Seeing how stressed he was, I softened my tone. "You seem really worked up. What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated before replying. "The CEO of my company is at the hotel for work and, by chance, met my boss. When he heard about our wedding, he decided to join. He even brought a gift and took an empty seat left by a sick colleague." "That's unexpected," I said, surprised. "This could be a huge opportunity for me," he added. "Don't waste time worrying about your dress, just do what my mom says." His words stung, but arguing felt pointless. I stayed quiet and prepared myself for the ceremony. The wedding went smoothly until the reception speeches. That's when my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone and started her rant. "Raised in a single-parent home, she's ugly and lacks common sense," she declared loudly, "but don't worry, I'll train her properly." Ignoring my father-in-law's attempts to stop her, she kept going. I clenched my fists, barely holding back my anger, when suddenly, a middle-aged man stood up. "You don't belong here," the man said firmly, glaring at my mother-in-law. Then, he turned to me and said, "Let's go." He led me out of the hall. My mother-in-law shouted in disbelief, "Who is this man interrupting my speech?" Anthony, however, had gone pale. "Why is the CEO here?" he stammered, clearly shaken. That's when I realized, the man leading me away was Anthony's CEO. We left the reception and returned to the dressing room. Still confused, I asked, "Why are you here?" He looked at me and smiled, "Because I'm also your father." It all came together. My parents had divorced because of constant arguments and differing personalities, but even after their separation, they stayed in touch for my sake. My dad always provided support, even after my mom needed care. Though we didn't live together, we remained close. I hadn't asked much about my father's job, so I was stunned. "I can't believe you're the CEO of Anthony's company," I said. Even I was surprised, my father admitted. "But why are you here? You told me you had an important meeting and couldn't come to my wedding," I asked. "My meeting ended earlier than expected," he explained. "I came to at least drop off a gift, but when I asked for the names of the bride and groom at the reception, I realized it was your wedding." He continued, "I spoke with a colleague, found out a seat was open, and decided to attend. I wanted to surprise you. I never imagined things would turn out like this." Before I could reply, the dressing room door opened. "Pearl, you shouldn't have run off like that," my mother-in-law said in a strangely sweet tone I'd never heard before. Her fake kindness sent shivers down my spine. She must have realized my father was Anthony's CEO. My father glared at her. "Who do you think is responsible for all of this?" he asked firmly. It was just a little joke, she stammered. A joke? My father said coldly. How dare you make such a disgusting joke on my daughter's wedding day? That's unforgivable. And no, it wasn't a joke, she mumbled, clearly flustered. Then you're saying you seriously called my daughter ugly? My father demanded, his voice rising. Faced with his anger, my mother-in-law froze, mumbling, and well, while avoiding his gaze. Suddenly, Anthony burst into the room, rushing to kneel before my father. I apologize for my mother's behavior, he said. You're apologizing to the wrong person, my father said sternly, looking down at Anthony. Pearl, I'm so sorry, my mom acted on her own, Anthony said, turning to me. If that's true, why didn't you stop her when she insulted me? I asked. I was shocked and didn't know what to do. Besides, my dad tried to stop her, Anthony replied weakly. But you looked like you were enjoying yourself, I said. That's not true, it's all your imagination, he shouted defensively. The only one to blame is my mom. Anthony pointed at his mother, who gasped in disbelief. Anthony, are you betraying your mama? Didn't we agree to discipline this cheeky wife together? She screeched, her true nature showing. Don't say anything unnecessary, Anthony shouted at his mother, covering her mouth to stop her from speaking. Her muffled protest sounded almost comical. So, care to explain what's really going on? My father asked, his voice sharp and commanding. Anthony trembled but finally spoke. When Pearl insisted on choosing her wedding dress, my mom said it would make her a cheeky wife if she wasn't disciplined, he confessed. What's wrong with me choosing my own dress? I demanded. It's a wife's job to listen to her mother-in-law, Anthony replied. If you couldn't even do that, I thought you'd turn into a bad wife who wouldn't listen to me either. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a hierarchy, I argued. If I can't make you obey, then what's the point of marrying an old hag on the verge of 40? Anthony blurted out, his true feelings slipping out. The room went silent, his words stung deeply. So, all the things you said about wanting to care for my mom and becoming a family of 3, those were lies? I asked, my voice shaking. Of course, he snapped. You've got savings, don't you? I was planning to use that money to build a 2-family house and make you work like a slave while I lived happily with my mom, but now it's all ruined. Anthony's selfishness was on full display. He didn't even seem to realize how horrifying his words were until my disgusted expression made him pause. No, that's not what I meant, he stammered, panicking. I shook my head. It's over, you don't want a wife, you want a maid and a wallet. Wait, Anthony pleaded. I just lost my temper, I didn't mean any of that. How can I believe you now? I replied firmly, I won't marry you. Anthony began pacing the room, clearly panicking, before shouting, but the wedding is today, we can't just send everyone home. I'll apologize to the guests and return their gifts. Since your mother caused this, you can cover the wedding expenses, I said calmly. You've got to be kidding, Anthony yelled. This is all your fault for making such a big deal over one little outburst. One little outburst? I repeated. All the horrible things you and your mother have said to me, I've got it all right here. I pulled out my phone and hit play. A recording of my mother-in-law's cruel words filled the room. Poor, ugly, worthless, one insult after another in her sharp voice. Anthony froze, his face pale. My father crossed his arms, glaring at him. Anything else you'd like to add? He asked coldly. When did you record all of this? My mother-in-law asked, horrified. I'm not stupid, I replied. I'm suing for emotional distress. I was just trying to discipline my daughter-in-law. I didn't do anything wrong, she protested. If you don't pay up willingly, I'll take you to court. You can repeat all this in front of a judge, I said calmly. What are you talking about? This isn't a joke, she said, panicking as she realized how much trouble she was in. She went pale, slumping down. I'll be rethinking your position at the company as well, my father added, sealing her fate. Finally, Anthony broke down, falling to his knees. I'm sorry, Pearl, please forgive me, he begged. That's right, Pearl, you're married now. You can't just divorce, Anthony and his mother pleaded. If we get through this, we'll be a great couple, right? I shoved them aside and glared at them. Silence, scum, go to hell. With that, I walked out of the room. I kept my promise and cancelled my engagement with Anthony, filing a lawsuit for emotional distress against my mother-in-law. My ex-husband had to pay for the entire wedding, and the issue was finally resolved. Soon after, my ex-husband faced pressure at work when his colleagues found out about the wedding disaster. At my father's request, he was transferred to a remote branch in Nebraska, effectively getting a demotion. My ex-mother-in-law was scorned by her own family and divorced by my ex-father-in-law. She was kicked out of the house. Now, I'm focused on my career and have no interest in remarrying. Over time, my parents have also started to rebuild their relationship, and we now have family dinners together. I'm living a much happier life now.